Awesome. Well, here we are, season 3 of the Team Coaching Zone podcast. Super excited to get this underway. My name is Krister. I'm joined with Carissa, previous host of season 2 of the Team Coaching Zone podcast,
Yeah.
Melissa Sayer and Adam Shu. Also, we have a fifth colleague, Dr. Lisa Walker, having some electrical issues at her house. So hopefully we will get her back in here for the start. And really wonderful to have you joining us here in season 3. So welcome, welcome, welcome. And this is the launch episode. And this upgrade we have now is doing this as a live stream. So every month we are going to be having a live stream, and true to form, having a team of podcasters rather than the traditional one-on-one style type interviews that you may be familiar with, although we may do some of those kind of one-on-one interviews. But since we are into the business of team coaching and helping with team effectiveness, our thinking was really, let's get a team of people on and podcasting. And in some other industries, that's pretty much the norm, but still in the coaching industry, in the team coaching profession, podcasts are still relatively rare. There's not a widespread number of them. I think there's just a handful of them that focus on teams and team coaching. So what we want to do here is in this episode, we're going to be framing up this season, which the theme is on regenerating organizations through team coaching. As you all know, we have a world that's been disrupted, continues to be disrupted coming out of COVID. We're not out of the woods yet, it appears, with the new strains that are cropping up. We've got war going on with Ukraine. So our species and our world continues to be volatile, even troubled, one might say. And this has really, I think, changed the nature of organizations forever. I don't think we're going back to the way things were before the pandemic. And it's a time for us to regenerate, to adapt, to pivot, and really, find our way to contribute as team coaches in this new emerging world. And, hopefully a new normal emerges and we get some role in influencing that to a greater or lesser degree. So what I want to do here just in the outset is paint a little bit of a picture for you, a little bit of the history of how we got to where we are. For those of you who are new to the podcast, some of you may have been longtime listeners, but it was around 2015, actually January 1st of 2015, when I launched the Team Coaching Zone podcast season 1. And I'm an organizational psychologist by training. I've been, in business since around 2003 while I was doing my PhD at Columbia University in the area of social and organizational psychology. I was working as a practitioner, trainer, facilitator of retreats. I did a lot of team building interventions and all that. And as I saw the executive coaching field evolved, I started to see the limitations of one-off team building events, that we would create these wonderful events. People got motivated, teams would come together. But then, a week or two later, a few months later, the team would just slip back into its routines. So I started looking for information on what does it take to move beyond, to create a great team and move beyond these one-off events. And that led to a kind of an inquiry, a public inquiry around what does coaching a team look like over time, just like we coach executives? Is that even a smart idea to do? Is it something out there? And there was a bit of information on this topic, but not really a body of knowledge. So I said, well, I need that podcast for my own development. So I'm going to just start interviewing people and set the goal of doing 100 interviews, which I achieved a number of years later. And it was, I like to say, it was the best decision I ever made in my life from a professional standpoint, because it changed me. It built all kinds of relationships. The people that I'm on this podcast with are, fruits of that endeavor. And it's just been a really wonderful journey, life-changing journey. So that was 7-8 years ago now. At that time in 2015, team coaching was not even on the radar. When I used that word, I would get strange looks. I like to say the deer in the headlights look from clients or other practitioners. But boy, we have come a long way in 7 or 8 years. And before that, obviously, there were many pioneers 20, 30 years ago, trying to plant this seed of team coaching. But now we're really a bona fide profession. We have lots of certification programs in this. We've got team coaching supervision. We have professional bodies like the International Coaching Federation that are trying to bring standards and make this a practice. Obviously out of the coaching profession, there's a big wave of people entering this field in the larger learning and development and organizational development arena. We have folks who are doing team coaching. A lot of times I think they feel this is old wine in new bottles, maybe with a little bit of a spin. And then in the software development world, we have hundreds of thousands of agile practitioners and coaches that are doing their form. So this is a really eclectic, dynamic, interesting space. And I think a lot of it is born out of the need for organizations to adapt, that the 100-plus-year-old command and control management hierarchy is really not fit for purpose in all situations and environments. And that's what's pushing us in this area. And then you layer on top of that COVID, globalization, insecurity, climate change, et cetera. And we have the ingredients for a really dynamic space. So anyhow, that's kind of the backdrop. After I got into 100 episodes, I actually interviewed all the members on this podcast, with the exception of Dr. Lisa Walker, who hopefully will join us. But I interviewed Carissa Bubb along the way. And Carissa and I, after that podcast, started chatting, and she started, given her journalism background. Carissa was a former broadcast journalist with the BBC, expressed interest in getting involved. And eventually that led to her taking over the show. So Carissa took on in moving on the podcast into season 2. I will just say one more thing before passing it over to Carissa to talk a little bit about herself in season 2 to recap the history here. Season 1 was really what was called Exploring the Art and Science of Team Coaching. So it was really about techniques, the how do we demystify the process of being a team coach? What are the phases, the competencies we need? And so that's really what that was really about, is a lot of stories of successes and failures from team coaches and lots of learning. So that's kind of what season 1 was about. But Carissa took it from how do we move from team coach to change maker? And with that, I will pass it over to Carissa.
Oh, Krister, thank you so much. And it's so exciting to be here again. And I'm really excited to watch it back. I feel for Lisa and was really looking forward to her contribution today. And hopefully she can join us. But firstly, I want to say to you, Krister, congratulations for really launching the Team Coaching Zone podcast. Amazing. That was 100 episodes, a wonderful library. It's amazing to think that thousands and thousands of people are still every month downloading those recordings. I think it's fabulous. And I just want to say, if that January the 1st was a New Year's resolution, you definitely hit the target. So well done for that. As you said, I took it over, having been a broadcast journalist with the BBC, having always had a fascination for the human story. And it was wonderful to listen as the field was evolving and we were looking at how do you do this? I was really interested in why are we doing this? So what are the biggest systemic challenges that organizations are facing, that we as a team coaching industry are facing, and how do we step up, as an industry, individually, to really address some of those challenges. For example, the Sustainability Development Goals, and, is there something that we could do, and how are organizations meeting those challenges? So there was something about going into the field and finding out more, looking at the ecosystem and the bigger, wider world. And then there was also this other area of being, which was really around, as you said, change maker. Who do we need to be individually and collectively to be able to realize that change? And I had quite a smorgasbord of interviews with various people. And in that, from some of the names, people are very familiar in the team coaching industry, people who've really mapped the territory of team coaching. But there are also other people who are looking at more adaptive culture and leadership from a different perspective. What I came to the conclusion, and you mentioned agile coaches, I realized as the field was moving so fast and as the world was becoming increasingly complex, that just having one voice wasn't going to really do it. And that I had my own limitations as a host in being able to deep dive and rip with some of our interviewees. And that I love the idea that we now had a team presenting this where we could really go even bigger and deeper at the same time. So it's with that sort of interest that I'm delighted that we're here again. And on that note, rather than say anything more, I'm going to go to Adam because I think people know enough about me. I'd really love people to know more about Adam.
Good morning, everybody. Hello, colleagues, and thank you, everybody, for joining us for this first broadcast, live stream, if you will, of Team Coaching Zone. First, I just want to say how thrilled I am to be with Krister, Carissa, and Melissa, and I wish our colleague Lisa could be here to join and just share a little bit about myself and what my passions are. So I am a organizational coach by trade, have been in the field for about a decade now, leading and helping to coach agile teams, as was mentioned. And my passion is truly to help teams and organizations get better. So what I'm really passionate about is learning how organization act as a organism, really, right? It's a living, breathing thing that needs to be cared for. And there's a lot of complexities when it comes to the work that teams have to do and organizations have to do to make things happen. And if we look at organizations as living, breathing systems, if you will, what are the things that we do to help affect the behavior within the organization at the leadership level, at the team level, and also individuals. So I'm very passionate about that. On a side note, my other side passions recently have been getting into cryptocurrencies and NFTs. So I've been actually conversing a lot with Krister on some of the new fringe things that are happening, and there's so many interesting things that we could probably also take a look and learn from how NFTs and cryptocurrencies are affecting the world today.
Yeah.
Right now, as you mentioned, there's a war going on, and without much barrier, there has been a lot of donations that are going across to where it needs to go through use of cryptocurrency and the blockchain. So that's amazing. So it's just a kind of a amazing thing to watch. History is happening right now. But my main purpose here is to basically help continue the discourse on making our world better when it comes to understanding what we need to do as coaches and what leaders need to do as leaders so that we can help our organizations thrive. And just to share with you, I'm here in Tampa, Florida, so it's kind of a rainy day here, but I'm at least representing the southern side of the US, and I'm so happy to be here. So I'm gonna pass it back over.
I'm delighted to hear that it's raining in Tampa, because I'm here in Dublin in Ireland, and normally the rain is reserved for us here. That's why we have such lush green surroundings. But hi everybody, my name's Melissa Sayer. I'm so excited to be here, and what excites me most is this team of teams. And I know Lisa is not here, but I'm sure she'll be here next time, and extending that out beyond just us as co-hosts, as a team of teams, and how we will bring other members of our ecosystem in to have some really great conversations. I guess what I'm really passionate about is learning and education. I think it's kind of just all through my DNA, and I've always seen coaching, especially team coaching, as a learning partnership between coach and team, as a learning partnership between coach and who it is that we're coaching. And I really feel that, organizations could have the potential to be more joyful, to be more healthy, to be more fulfilling. And that's what drives me on to work in organizations and work with teams and create that momentum around, how do we learn together? How do we grow together? So I think my purpose really is to create learning environments and to be part of learning environments. Like, I just want to learn more and more. And that's why, the Team Coaching Zone has always epitomized that for me. Like, it's it's a learning environment that Krister
Yeah.
created. And that's our kind of special link, is all, Krister inviting us all onto the podcast. So as I mentioned, I'm here in Dublin. I'm enjoying spring, tulips, daffodils, and really looking forward to our conversation.
Fantastic. Wonderful. So, Krister, I think we'll go back to you. Are you there, Krister? Or shall we go?
I'm absolutely here. I just wanted to make a little shout out to Lisa Walker, who was joining us and then had an electrical work being done on her house, and she was on, and then all of a sudden she was off. And so we may or may not get her back, but I want to do just a brief introduction of Lisa Walker, who will be joining us. And, each time we do these live streams, which will be monthly, it may be all 5 of us, and maybe a couple of us, we're going to be bringing on other people other than just the 5 of us. But what will be consistent is a team of people showing up every month, and you'll see some familiar faces and some new faces every time. We're going to try to mix that up. But we have on the team Dr. Lisa Walker. She's a master certified coach, a leadership psychologist, executive coach, C-suite advisor, team coach, speaker, and Forbes Coaches Council member. Really distinguished person, very skilled, brings a lot of really wonderful experience, including team coaching. And we're delighted to have her on the show. You can check Lisa out on LinkedIn, and maybe I can pop that in the chat if you want to get to know Lisa.
You just did it. There you go.
One step ahead of me. When in coaching, we like to say that's intuition. So when your intuition fires, usually it's a good idea to act on it, because it's usually a good thing. Exactly. But anyways, Lisa has a really rich background. I think you're going to love her, and getting to know her, and we will bring her in. And Lisa, if you're listening in, we are sorry about the electrical troubles you're having. But that's the way it goes. Whenever you're going to launch something that's technology enabled, despite we were all ready yesterday prepping, there's always curveballs. And I think that in some ways, we always have to leave a little bit of room for the spirit to come in, that we can't over design and over script things. And I think all of you who are team coaches know that the best laid plans the universe will always conspire to throw a curveball in your plans, and you just got to pivot and roll with that. So the 4 of us will hold it down this time, and we look forward to Lisa coming back next time. I think, Adam, we're going to pivot over to you to share a little bit of just some of the new things with the live stream and all that. And then I can share, Lisa was going to share with us a little framing for season 3, which I've already done a little bit of, but I may say a few more words about that before we dive into the topic of regenerating organizations through team coaching and exploring some of the themes we might be touching on this season.
Yeah. So thank you, Krister. And so what I'm really excited about, and when we started talking about relaunching the Team Coaching Zone podcast, a thought came across to some of us about, hey, in the world that we are in today, many of us do follow other influencers and other streamers, if you will. Why don't we give this live streaming also a try? And the goal of this is to make it a little bit more of a dynamic conversation versus just a one-way, right? So I think all of us are very big supporters of podcasts. I've been listening to podcasts ever since I found out about them, downloading them on my Stitcher app and listening to Krister and Carissa doing their shows. But we wanted to give a little bit of a different experience, and that's where livecast comes in, live streaming. And really, we're hoping to have interactions with our audience. So in the moment, just like Krister mentioned, we kind of want to allow the spirit of the conversations to come in. And if there's something interesting that somebody's commenting on, we want to be able to comment on that and have that conversation as well. Every once in a while, we might even pull in maybe an audience member into the conversation if need be. But as you probably see, you could actually chat on the live stream. So every once in a while, we will actually highlight some of the comments that are being made. So here's a good comment. I'm just going to highlight one of our colleagues that we know very well, Gabriel Abella. Gabriel Abella, who's watching us right now, and he's making a comment that it's great. So good to hear that we're having good quality come through. Abigail Wall, who's also a influencer, who's joined on, and good to see that they're interacting in the chat. Here's another colleague that I see. So good to see that there's a lot of people already interacting in the chat, and that's what we're hoping for, is this interaction. And as we're discussing our topics, if something comes up that you want to opine on, please do, because that's the whole goal of this, is so that we can actually have a good conversation, not just one-sided, right? So the more diverse the conversation, the better. So that's the main thing. These will be, of course, recorded. We know not everybody can make this time. We live in a very global world. We have a lot of people in different parts of the globe. So at least they won't miss it. They could always go back, but unfortunately, they're not going to be able to participate through a recording. So that gives you a little bit of a sense of what's different with this season's podcast. So back to you.
Excellent. Well, guys, we want to share a little bit about what to expect in this season. And as we mentioned, the theme is regenerating organizations through team coaching. So we do feel we are at a pivot point in the life of organizations and the evolution of organizations. And, even prior to COVID, I think with books like Reinventing Organizations, like Lowe, there's this sense that, our current organizational designs are starting to reach their shelf life, and that something new is wanting to emerge. And in some ways, I think COVID is really hastening that and accelerating that natural process that was already underway. And so our sense is, from the clients we work with, from the teams we're a part of, obviously we've made a big pivot from in-person to now more digital than in-person. Maybe hybrid working's coming back. So just the whole physical experience of work has changed, and that has led to all kinds of new issues around how do we stay motivated in a virtual environment? What's the limit of how many? I'm on a 2 or 3 Zoom call per day max limit myself. I have about 2 or 3 hours of attention span. So, is the whole 9 to 5 structure, which came out of a different period in time, all those things changing? A lot of these things are deeply ingrained. So I think while we've come a long way in 2 years, it may just be the beginning of even more, tumultuous change. And so that's really the spirit of what is team coaching? What's the landscape? Do we need it anymore? How is it evolving? What's going on in the life of organizations? How do we link up this skill set and these capabilities we have, which are changing and growing, with the ecosystem that we're a part of, and really team coaching to contribute to the species, the prosperity, and hopefully peace of our species, right, and survival of our species, even, one could argue. So we will be having these monthly live streams, team of people on here. Again, some of us, maybe some guests, kicking around topics. And a little bit later in the show, we're going to be asking you for feedback on topics that you want to see. In between the live streams, members of our team may be out interviewing. So we will do those kind of traditional style interviews and generating some additional content. So you can expect to see some recorded content that's issued. But these live streams are really, we're hoping, will be kind of a community gathering, and really have a community conversation about our field and our industry and how we can continue to co-evolve it together. So I think that's really the spirit of this. Melissa is going to speak a little bit to the audiences that we have intended, and really get us into a conversation today about this topic of regenerating organizations through team coaching to kick us off. So Melissa.
Thanks, Krister. So as Adam mentioned, we'd invite you to pop any questions, observations, anything that you want to share with us that you feel is relevant around this whole theme of regenerating organizations through team coaching. As I was listening to you guys in the first kind of 20 minutes or so, there were so many different things you all said that I wanted to really dive into already. I feel that the conversation has already been very rich and taken us off in a lot of different directions. But I heard Carissa talk about the ecosystem and, the interest in ecosystems. And before we dive into kind of the world of team coaching, Carissa, I'd just love to hear your kind of, top line observations around what you're noticing is going on in, the ecosystems that we're visiting as team coaches, and What are you seeing that they're needing to regenerate?
Yeah, that's wow. Where should we begin? I think everybody would probably tell you, and I just came off another call. I don't only have 2 or 3 Zoom calls, Krister. Lucky you, but not lucky. Well, good diet, good discipline and boundaries, I should say. But I just came off another call, and burnout comes up. People are sort of looking at the cherry blossoms. I'm here in London in the UK, and pining for a connection with nature, a slower pace, sort of what feels, inherently natural. Let's put it that way, versus another hour on Zoom, and so that spiritual burnout, I think, not just a mental one or an emotional one. It's a spiritual craving, a calling to somehow be grounded and reconnected with life itself, to be able to express life in organizations, not to kind of just get through the day. So there's that hunger and that yearning for, and at the same time, of course, things are moving faster. Just the massive advancement of technology just since the pandemic means that there is even more data, more information, more speed, more diversity and optionality. And I think, how do you balance that you've got more and more access, and yet you're just desperately to unplug? People are increasingly wanting to unplug and reground themselves. So that's definitely one thing I'm seeing. And then I think there's another one, which is this kind of dawning realization that if we just did a reorg, a structural reorg in the classic way, we're not going to go anywhere. We actually need to upgrade our systems as humans. We need to evolve our meaning making, our sense making. And because there is just so much out there, we need to do that collectively. We need to do that together. And we need to welcome that diversity, the other person's view, even if that annoys us, to begin to get a better sense of what is emerging here. What is it that we're being called to do? And then I think very clearly this whole sustainability issue, which you could put on the blanket of climate change, which is much, much bigger, which is, I think there's a real sense that we are running out of time now. There is a race for humankind on this planet, and that we need to start collaborating and showing up with much more collective leadership to sort of drive some fundamental changes in the way that we run our economies. Just the shift from short-term thinking to long-term thinking, I think, and all of that takes, to your love and passion, Melissa, learning and unlearning.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Carissa. And I'm struck by what you're saying about the need for collective leadership and a different way of thinking about organizations. And for me, I think it's like a mindset shift as well. And Krister was talking earlier about, hierarchies. And I just wonder, Krister, can you relate to what Carissa is saying here and what it is that hierarchy is kind of doing to organizations and what we need now as we think about new ways of working?
You're on mute, my dear friend.
I needed him. I did that faux pas. It's interesting because I think hierarchy has a bad name, and like many things, I don't think it is black and white. That actually throughout nature, there are hierarchies in the universe, but I think it's more about a pendulum shift. And for me, one of the things I'm interested in this season is I have like 5 things that I'm excited about to explore around this topic of regenerating organizations. But one of them is really, as a social psychologist and organizational psychologist, one of the areas I'm really interested in is evolutionary psychology. So over our 2.5 to 3 million years of evolution as a species, we have survived. We are apex predators on this planet. We have gone through amazing changes. And it wasn't because of our speed, our strength that we survived and adapted. It was our intelligence and our ability to collaborate. So deeply ingrained in our DNA is a way of organizing in small groups, call them teams, call them bands or tribes, whatever you want, which is wired into our psychology. And leadership in our ancestral environment was much more situational. It was much more fluid and flexible. It was much more distributed. And leadership mattered, but it wasn't as rigid and controlled. So there was hierarchy again, but it was a bit more situational and it was a little bit more fluid. And so I think, the push to new organizational designs, a shift to back to self-managing structures, I think harkens to our DNA as a species. And one of my colleagues on LinkedIn the other day put out a Fast Company article about why people are not going back to work. Many people left their jobs during COVID. And money turns out to not be the number one reason why people are not going back to work, although it is a determining factor. A lot of it centers around the relationship with the boss. And interestingly, I was quoting that statistic 20 years ago when I was in my conflict resolution training days. So something fundamentally about our relationship to authority and leadership is out of alignment with the way we have designed organizations. And as a social scientist, one of the things that's interesting in my field in organizational psychology, leadership is the most studied phenomenon of all social science topics. It has the most articles, the most books, the most resources. It's a huge, and in the applied fields, it's a huge industry, leadership development. Yet for all of this knowledge and research and practice, we still get these crappy numbers that the number one reason why people quit their jobs is relationship to leadership. And so for me, the answer to that, and this is something I'd love to explore this season, is not more leadership development. It's not more training individuals to be better leaders. Although I think that moves the needle a little bit. I think it is a revisiting of who we are as human beings and the kinds of environments and structures within which we thrive. I'm a believer that structure drives behavior. And so when a team has a clear structure, it knows where it's going, it knows roles, it has the safety it needs, we're clear on how we're going to work. We don't need a lot of direction and management. In fact, I think probably more often than not, that's a nuisance. And at worst, it's a real problem. So anyways, that's a long-winded answer, Melissa. I don't know if it addresses your question, but I do think in parallel to that is this shift from organizing companies around individuals to organize individual-centric org design to more team-centric design. And, I think there's a lot of knowledge around that and wisdom, but I think that's the trend. And it's going to take us a while to get away from our dependency on heroic leadership and all that. But I think it's well underway. And anyways, that's a topic I'm super excited to dig in more into.
I apologize. Melissa, would you mind if I add on to what Krister just said?
Please do, because I have, I'd love to hear what you have to say, but I have a quite specific question for you, Adam. But yeah, fire ahead.
No, I'm only interjecting because the point that Krister just brought up about the changing landscape in terms of organizations evolving and what's happened in the most recent year with the pandemic, with the great migration or the great resignation. I wanted to share that I'm part of that trend. So just within the last 2 months, I left my company of 16 years and decided to make a career change for myself. So I'm also participating a little bit as a, if you will, it may be a subject matter so that we could look at. But I definitely resonate with what Krister is talking about in terms of not only looking at always the leadership to being the thing that we point at when things don't go well. And that's what I'm, again, passionate about, which is looking at the whole organization as a system. I think all of us are familiar with Dan Pink's, autonomy, mastery, and purpose when it comes to what motivates people to actually want to engage and do great things. But I think there's another lens that we need to apply to it, because the concept is great. And I think many people actually are very much also resonates with them, autonomy, mastery, and purpose and what they are. But we have to understand that autonomy doesn't just come from the worker. Autonomy is the responsibility of people who are in power to do so. So unless the leadership imbues that power with the teams that they are basically responsible for, the autonomy doesn't come. So as much as I want to say, hey, I want to be able to work the way I want when I want, it's many times it's not dictated by me. very much also with purpose, right? So I would say there's almost there's a co-ownership of that when it comes to those topics. So it's either the organization, the leadership, or the people that are involved that have to say, I need to take a bigger part in terms of purpose. What is my purpose here? Or maybe this is a shared responsibility with my leader, or it's maybe mastery, right? So as much as your organization would love for you to be a better coach, what are you doing with it to own, hey, this is also my responsibility to take that on? So that's something I'm also very interested in talking about this season, is how do we put different lenses on some of the topics we all know and love, but in a slightly different approach, and that might uncover some things.
I think we might have just lost Melissa for briefly, but I'll pick up on that, Adam, which is and link it to what Krister said, which is something about, I think that one of the other trends we definitely see is more organizations now aligning profit to purpose. And how do we do that so that we can create sustainable profit for good? And everybody recognizing individually, as teams, as organizations, there's everyone has a part to play. And so creating that courage and that bravery, playing on purpose rather than playing not to lose, which is going back to your evolutionary psychology point, Krister, which is how we're kind of primed, right? We're primed to protect ourselves and protect our identities. We need to shift our meaning making to be those courageous people. And when it comes to what you were saying about organization shifting from individual objectives and acknowledging the individual to acknowledging the team, Krister, I think for me, when I think back over my 20 plus years now of coaching organizations and their systems, it's one of the biggest challenges around that is that the organization thinks that the lack of accountability, that if you make it collective, then it's easy for some individual to kind of slack, and it's much harder to see who's pulling their weight and not. And so I'm just wondering, like, again, what are the kind of practices, the structures that need to be put in place so that that there is more of a focus on holding that collective responsibility.
Yeah, that's good stuff. So I know we lost Melissa there. Maybe she'll come back. And as we think about this theme of regenerating organizations through team coaching, I'm curious what other,
Actually, Krister, I'm going to be really, really rude. I'm just going to say, because we're live and what the hell, this whole idea of a quantum flirt. We're two people down on our team. This is looking a lot like an organization today, right?
Exactly.
Well, something is going on. Technology and there's a quantum flirt.
It also does talk about the resilience. When you're part of a team, you can keep going even when life happens, right? And we can adjust and adapt. But if we were just a solo show today with a guest and one is gone, it's the end of the show. So the show must go on. But in thinking about this theme of regenerating organizations, I was thinking about 5. I limited myself to 5 key shifts that I really want to explore this season. I'm curious what other ones you have, but Carissa, you touched on one, which also Adam was riffing on, which is really the shift from profit to purpose. And, the role that motivation around autonomy, mastery, and purpose plays. I don't think it's about one or the other, but, historically, at least in the 1970s and 80s, when I was coming up as a young person, there was the era of the Wall Street, right? The kind of cutthroat, survival based. And I think we still have a lot of legacy around that. And there is something to say about survival. And as a young practitioner, I didn't know if I was going to make it as a team coach and as a practitioner. And so I was in a survival based mode. I'm in a little bit of a different stage of my career now. And so I can get a little bit more picky about which clients I want to work with and focus a bit more on the organizations that I care about. But I do think this trend from profit to purpose is one. Another one that's really on my mind is what I'm calling from organizations as life extractors to life generators. And the reason why I say that is I was in with a team in New York City, actually a large group last week of 30 people, not really a team, it was a whole department. And one of the things I noticed was physically how unhealthy everybody was in the room. And I don't think this is just a phenomenon of organizations. I think it's a larger issue about our food supply and our relationship to food and such. But, as one commenter I was listening to recently on a podcast talked about, we're living at a really interesting time in history where we have obesity combined with malnutrition at the same time. That we have something fundamentally wrong with our relationship to food. And if you think about it, next to sleep, human beings can only last a couple of days without sleeping, but we can't last much longer without food. We can go a little bit longer than that, obviously a few days. But something that's so fundamental to daily life, which is eating, sleeping, and movement, somehow we really need to that's something that we need to think about. Or why are we team coaching, and how do we build sustainable ways of working? I grew up at a time, my father was in a corporation, had a stroke when I was pretty young, ended up dying not too many years after retiring. That was pretty much the norm. And I think there's a whole interesting gender conversation we can have. But the norm back in the 80s and 90s, I don't know if this still continues today, like many men, corporate warriors, didn't live much longer than a few years after retirement. So dying of heart attacks, right? And so our relationship to organizations, there's a whole health focus, which I do think extends to the environment, our civilization. And I'd love to really talk a little bit about, I'd love to go in and see teams where people are vibrant and healthy rather than burnt out, haggard, and unhealthy, And so I think there is a topic there to talk about because we do spend so much of our daily lives at work. The health piece needs to come in. I spoke already about the shift from individual centric to team centric, talking a bit about the shift from centralized to more distributed leadership. And the last one, which I'm really excited to explore this season, is more of a shift from the Western-centric perspective to more of a BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, or people of color perspective. I think, so many of these professional fields and the voices have been dominated by the West. And so I think we really need to have a global voice here on this show. And I think that's something we're going to be searching out to bring on. I have a particular interest in Indigenous perspectives only because of my evolutionary psychology bent that I think, when we shifted from hunter-gatherers to agriculture, there were interesting advantages that happened, but we also lost a lot of things along the way. And I think we do still have some communities around the world that are organized a bit differently than our modern, kind of society. So love to get some of that perspective onto the show. But Adam and Carissa, what about you two? What else are you? And it looks like Melissa has come back.
Yeah.
What other shifts are you guys looking for? And we should start to get a few more voices in, and then we can start to pivot towards where we're going to go next.
Yes.
Go ahead, Adam. You go first.
Yeah, something I wanted to pin to one of the 5 things that you were talking about, Krister, is the shift from organizations from life extractors to generators. And you were focusing a lot on the physical, but right now the topic that's happening in families, right? And again, we all are part of families. The trend is the emotional aspect, the toll that's happening right now. Personally, I think for myself and for my family, it's been the term is burnout, right? There's been so many changes that have been happening within our organizations that basically causes us to have to refocus and think about how we're actually addressing our emotional needs. And basically, that should be a conversation we should be exploring more and more in our episodes as well, because I know there's a lot of people that are looking for better ways to not get burnt out. It's just the very simple way of saying it. And I'll share with you this. So the new job that I transferred to, one of the things that drew me here was, the capability of having remote work 100%. But what we found out was within our team, there's definitely a human need to connect, just like Carissa mentioned. Like, we need to get out. Like, it's great that I could stand here in my office and, have a very quick conversation. But what we're finding is we're needing to connect. So the people on my team are now very purposefully scheduling time face-to-face just to sit together, right? And having that person next to you just notice happening with you and getting that unsolicited feedback. I think that is so important as human beings. We need to have that, and when we don't have it, we seek it out. So I definitely agree with you there, Krister. So sorry, back to you, Carissa.
No, I'll pick up. You said two words there that are my two themes. One is 70% of the world's businesses are family businesses. And families tend to think generationally, they think long term. I think there's a lot there that we can learn from looking at who's coaching and how do we engage those businesses, help other people to learn with that long time perspective. How do we help family businesses, teams connect to each other so we build network systems that can really drive and shift bigger ecosystems? How do they work with local communities to create sustainable economic growth on the ground? I'm particularly interested in that topic. Another topic I'm really interested in is just this whole thing about ecology and life. Back to something you said, Adam, organizations as living dynamic systems, breathing systems. Krister, when I go into most places, the first thing I notice is the lack of breath. Nobody's breathing. I always say there's no space here to create. So, and people kind of go, oh yeah, breath work. But actually, if you're not breathing, you're not going to go very far. So I think we're beginning to recognize. I remember you had Amanda Blake on the show. I had a yoga teacher on the show. I think we're recognizing now that we need to look at all the senses and intelligence and much more. Coming back to your point, Adam, we're getting intuitively know we need to reground, we need to earth to be able to pick up on that intelligence. So the intelligence of trees, what can we learn about mycelium networks in order to run organizations? So I'm fascinated with that. And on that lovely note, I'm going to hand over to Melissa. It's lovely to see you back.
I'm back. So I bought myself a very fancy new MacBook over the lockdown, and it just keeps doing this weird stuff. It just shut down. So now I'm on another PC. But anyway, at least I am back. And to Krister's point, these things happen when you try and do things live. So I think I'm picking up on you guys sharing things that you really want to explore through season 3 and through these episodes. And we most definitely want to hear from our audience, from folks that are inside organizations, practitioners that are outside of organizations around, what are your curiosities? What would you like to see us talking about? And I was in meeting with some folks from an organization this morning that I do some work with. And I was kind of struck by how much I enjoy that. I enjoy the moving between returning back into office environments and organizations, but then also doing stuff like this. And I feel that there's, in my life anyway, there's a place for both. But one of the things that I'm particularly interested in exploring in this season, and it came up again this morning and some other conversations with other clients, is how do they organize themselves within the system in terms of not just what their collective work is. And I know we've been talking about this for quite a while amongst ourselves, but multi-team systems. So, and one of the things that keeps coming up is we need to connect with other teams in the organization to get our work done, but we don't have any reporting lines around some of these teams that we need to influence. So there's no hierarchy there as a bridge to being able to get collective work done, which is something that organizations rely on. So one of the things that I'm very interested in around regenerating organizations through team coaching is, how do we support that? How do we support organizations with being able to reimagine and change their mindsets around what does the collective work need, as opposed to putting together reporting lines that is not actually serving the work of the organization. So I'd love us to be able to explore some of those ideas.
And Melissa, I'm just picking up as you're speaking on Abigail Wall has, I think Adam just put up there, has made this comment that it's influence or the lack of influence. I'm just wondering how that plays into what you've just said there. I know I specialize in the area of strategic influence. And how do you build those relationships when the organization, and I'd love to hear more from Abigail, but as an organization, spreads, becomes more amorphous, the visibility becomes that much harder. How actually do you engage the people that you need to kind of whisper in their ear and really shift perspectives and get things done? So I'm wondering if that's what Abigail was talking to. Maybe she can tell us more later. Yeah. Adam,
Yes.
Just thinking here about this, are there any other things that you see in the comments, Krister, Melissa, anything else that you see that has been coming up that we want to look on? And
as we're scanning, I'll take the opportunity to kind of mention that we've been kind of sharing our thoughts about potential topics for this season. And it's a great segue to kind of let our audience know that we want to also hear their suggestions as well. So as they're on this live stream, if there's any topics that they would like to have explored, we would certainly want to take a look at those. But also, if for the people who aren't joining live, want to also mention that on the LinkedIn group that we have, they could also go there to make some suggestions. So if you're not already into the LinkedIn group, please find yourself. I'll throw on a link out there so you can join the LinkedIn group. But anybody can join. It's for the Team Coaching Zone podcast. And we have a lot of community members there. So we're definitely open to topics and ideas for people to suggest. And if there's a specific topic, and this is one thing we wanted to mention, is although the format is going to be mainly this, where we're going to have a panel of hosts having a discussion, every once in a while we are going to have a featured guest that we might want to deep dive into a little bit more for some of our shows. So and that's something that we're going to be playing around with to see if that's something that the audiences would like to see as well. So it's not always this. That's what I say it.
Melissa, I'm going to ask you a question if I could, and Adam, shut me up when you need to. But we talk a lot as if we're talking from a Western perspective, I think. This is an assumption I'm making about big global organizations, the kind that Adam might have come from. And of course, and I mentioned family businesses, but when I think I've just come back from Africa, where I was working for 6 weeks with a client, and just thinking there are parts of the world where there is so much opportunity, and where there are very different types of organizations there. And I was wondering, what do you think about how can we help parts of the world maybe where they're less developed, sort of accelerate, so do it right the first time rather than repeat what happened before. I don't know if that makes any sense. It's a very clumsy way of saying.
I think it makes great sense, Carissa, because I think you're 100% right. As we go about our work, we arrive into organizations, whether we notice or not, with a set of assumptions, a set of experiences, a set of skills, and a lot of that is grounded in, big global Western organizations. We see that in education all of the time. If you look at any of the case studies that students get to read, it's all situated in with these Western ways of viewing the world, viewing business, and so on and so forth. And I really like that you touched on this whole idea of family systems, because I was thinking about this on my drive home today, and what really got me curious around systems. And of course, for all of us, we first learn about systems in our families, right? So, and for good and for bad, we become part of that family dynamic and that family system. And I think that gets ingrained in us. And no matter how much work we do on ourselves, we still have the legacy of, how we were brought up in family systems. So this is a very long way of answering your question. I think how we can bring the work to other parts of the world is by going there with an openness to understand their family systems, to understand their culture, to understand, the differences in the roads that they have walked, what they have been exposed to, the challenges that they may be experiencing, the opportunities that they see, and then using our skill set in a learning partnership to say, well, we can hold the space to do some learning together. We've got some ideas around that. And I think it has to be very invitational as opposed to us forcing or,
Yeah. No, it wasn't that at all. I think it's more like there's a lot of curiosity to learn and grow, and what is there on offer.
Yeah.
I find that I'm being distracted by other comments. Abby is definitely making comments there that might be interesting to explore the role of the change agent changing, and I think that's what she meant about influence. So maybe that's a topic for another time.
Yeah, maybe to have Abigail on the show, because she's got a lot to share. And I do think, guys, we want to keep these shows to an hour, so we are in the home stretch here. And Adam, do you have a few things we should say here in closing? I enjoyed this conversation. Again, a little bit of an appetizer and taster for what's to come this season. But thank you all for those who are here listening to the live stream or those listening in post-production. We will be making this available on all the podcast platforms after. But, if you want the live, come to the live sessions.
Yes. One thing I do want to make mention is in order to make this experience better, we definitely need everybody's feedback. So I'm actually going to post a survey. If you wouldn't mind, if you're still around, please definitely take a moment to give us some feedback about the show and how we can make it better that's fit for your purpose. The other thing to mention is if you can also hit the like button on YouTube and subscribe to this channel. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is it'll help increase our audience. And second, it will also give us the opportunity to track our analytics, so we can get a sense of if this format is going to be best for our conversations. The other thing I want to mention is I know Krister is working on an updated website that he's going to be, I guess, linking the past seasons. So season 1 and 2 have already been recorded. We want to have it accessible to everybody, especially people who are just finding now about the Team Coaching Zone. So season 1 featuring Krister, season 2 with Carissa, and then of course season 3 where we're in right now. So you could always go to the website. It's still a work in progress, right, Krister? I know there's a couple of tweaks that you want to make. But
it's all live. It's all good right now. More
good
to come on that, but I'm sharing in the screen now. So, folks can go there. We will start to upload for season 3. There's nothing in there yet, but as soon as we have this recording, we will drop it in there. But this also goes out on Spotify and iTunes and TuneIn and, Google Podcasts and the like. So wherever you listen to episodes, you can listen there as well if you're on the go and you don't want the video version. So, yeah.
So I think the last thing we do want to mention from a housekeeping standpoint is I know some people have been asking, hey, is there opportunities to sponsor the Team Coaching Zone podcast, because it is very well received by the coaching community. And I believe, Krister, you have kind of a position on this. Did you want to quickly talk about it?
Yeah, I think we're just going with an advertising free, no overt marketing through the show. So we're not going to be having sponsors. I think the spirit of the Team Coaching Zone has always been an open to diverse perspectives, not any one company or school of thought or, product influencing this. So I think we want to keep that spirit that way. We are having some conversations about ways where we might, as a community, start to develop a way to contribute in service of a larger aim. We've been talking about women's leadership development in developing nations as a way to do that. So more to come on that. So we will find that. And, we may have on the website or can mention if there are opportunities, if people want to get training or things, but it will be kind of eclectic. But we really want to keep this as pure as possible and not do too much marketing through this show. So hopefully that answers that point, Adam.
Yeah, thank you very much, Krister. We definitely be on the lookout for those opportunities to participate in helping the organizations that do need support. So, I think with that, we're at a wrap. So, so just for my piece, I just want to say thank you to my co-hosts, Krister, Carissa, and Melissa. And sorry again, Lisa, you weren't able to join us. Hopefully you're watching us at least. Hopefully we'll get Lisa in our next episode. And again, we're showcasing what it takes to be a great team of teams, right? So we have very talented people, very just passionate about the topics that we're talking about. So no matter what the hiccups are, we're always going to be able to keep moving forward. So that just talks about how wonderful it is to be part of a great team. So thank you everyone. So any last words from anybody?
We're excited to see all of you. Please do send us your thoughts, your comments, your questions. This is about building community and learning together. So thank you. And thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Adam, for creating it. Thank you, Krister, for being the inspiration at the beginning. Okay.
Right. It's a wrap,
folks.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Take care. Bye.